I just feel a little humbled in sharing my experiences. But I just hope we're going to have a conversation today. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, from pre-COVID, our business has grown about 140%. And one of the things I was reflecting on is that what were the factors that really helped us? And how is it that through these challenging times, we've really grown? So I'm just diving straight into some of my learnings, insights, and then spend more time in, your comments and, discussion. So what I found was that from a business standpoint, companies who had managed, of course, their cash flows, who had managed their supply chain, who had managed their distribution network, and who had pivoted to digital operations had benefited disproportionately at the cost of some of the marginal players in the industry. So even though we're not a very large company, we're a small, medium enterprise in India, we found that we had business coming our way. And, I sat back and I said, what allowed us to do this? It's not that we knew pandemic was coming. We didn't know that there was going to be a crisis. And yet we seem to have had things in place, which really then brings me to, the next real insight that I've had, which is an organization, whether it be a business, whether it be a sport, whether it be us as individuals, any organization that carries the culture of continuous improvement is preparing itself either for unforeseen challenges or unforeseen opportunities. And this I had learned, cannot be a knee-jerk reaction. It cannot be a start-stop syndrome. It cannot be done tactically. It cannot be timed. It cannot be done in an opportunistic manner. It has to be an ongoing culture of constantly improving at every level. So just to give you an example of, what this meant for us. About, I would say, 20 years back, when we were a tiny company, I was very passionate about being process driven. So we had documented literally every process in the company. And for the past 20 years, every year we would have our audits, we would have internal audits, external audits, and there would be a culture of, constantly improving what we're doing and making sure it's all well documented. Come pandemic, we found that we were working with 4 or 5 different softwares. And I said, this is going to be a disaster for us. A, we don't have access to all our information in the office. B, a lot of it is on paper, then it's fragmented. So we pivoted to a holistic ERP system, which has 42 different applications called Zoho. And we actually did that in the midst of the pandemic, completely online. And I remember having the conversation with the company that was going to implement this for us. They said typically it takes 6 to 7 months from the time we engage to the time we implement. And we were already in Feb, and our new financial year starts on the 1st of April. And you typically want to do this in the new financial year because doing it mid-year has got its own challenges. So we had a window of 45 days. And I said to him, I said, let's do it. And I said, the reason I'm feeling confident is because all our processes are so well documented that for you to just dovetail that into software will not be as big a challenge as you might be facing with some other companies. And I said, you know what, let's just take this leap of faith. And that, to my mind, is one of the biggest risks and opportunities that came our way. And I was able to do it only because we had continually for the past 15 odd years improved on our process orientation. So I'm just giving this as a small example as to how this has really helped me. Which brings me to the next point, that discipline in good times shows up in difficult times. When business is good, we tend to get a little lax. And of course, it happens to me personally, it happens to us as a business. We are no different. So one of the things personally I try and do is keep people uh, disciplined on certain, good practices. So for example, we have something called a BWG in our company called a Better Way Group. Every department, every month has to sit together and find one way of doing something in a better way. And everybody sitting in an office has to get together once a month and find at least one way in which that particular office or that location where they're sitting can be managed in a better way. Now, some of the ideas that have come about, just to share with you what this means. At one end, we had the accounts department that compressed, which is when we had the physical files. From some 100 files, they came down to some 30 files, right? So they found a better way of doing it. And then we had another example of somebody, one department saying, the cups of tea are lying all over the place in the evening. So they actually did it in a manner where they made a little place and a label and keep your used teacups there so there's no breakage, there's no accident. It could be a big idea, it could be a small idea. But I think what helped us during and is still helping us during all these challenging times, including now with all the tariffs and everything else that's going on, is that this discipline has continued. So yes, we have certain headwinds, but we are finding that we are able to move ahead, I think, relatively better to many of the others in our industry. And the second discipline which we have maintained is the why analysis. Whenever something goes wrong, the first thing we do is try and take advantage of the learnings and insight and say, why did it happen? And we just keep digging a little deeper to get to the root cause. Now, a lot of people do this. I mean, everything that I'm telling you is not revolutionary or novel. But on the question which you had asked me that, growing in challenging times, what are some of the things that have helped? If you ask me, this has been also, I think, at the center of, growing through all these challenging times, that the discipline of sticking to stuff like this. Organizations have a tendency to solve the problem and move on. And we do the same, let me be honest. It's not that we're perfect at this. But I keep stopping ourselves and saying, yes, solve the problem, do the corrective action and move on, but don't lose the learning and the insight, because that is what is going to prepare us for the future. And honestly, over the years, having done so many YYs, then during the pandemic, now during the chaos, we find ourselves better prepared than if we hadn't, implemented some of our learnings and insights. People and all of us who've run organizations have always said that people are at the heart of everything we do. And the training, the development of the people is extremely critical. What I realized was that the training, it's at an intellectual level, which is great. But I said training cannot be the only ingredient for our people. And this is something I learned from IFC, and especially from Sarosh when he spoke about leading with love. And Peter, you will remember when we were co-chairing the roundtables, some of that came out in terms of leading with love. That is the second aspect is, so I don't use the word training and development, I say training and care, appealing to the intellectual and the emotional aspect of the human, of people who work with us. Now, this didn't start when times were challenging. This has been something that we've been trying to do ever since I started my organization. And because we have co-invested in the intellectual and the emotional aspect of our team members, something incredible happened. In the past 5 years, And I'm now saying 5 years because I'm using the pandemic as a starting point of the challenging times. Our attrition rate has been less than 5%. In terms of stepping up to responsibilities, it has just been remarkable. I don't think even once I've had to push back or ask someone to do something beyond. I mean, it just came naturally. And when I sit back and I think about it, I think it's a bit of a payback, if you may say so, from the team of some of things that we've done for them. And let me share one dilemma which I went through during these difficult times. So Aruna, who heads our customer care in the Chennai office, she lost her husband. And that was the time, and not to pandemic, not to COVID. I mean, he had some other underlying issue. And that's the time we had rescaled everybody's salaries by 15% because we didn't know what to expect, except that a certain pay grade and below were not touched. So she gave me a call. She's saying, listen, I fully understand the 15%. However, I've lost my husband. I'm the only bread earner for my family. My in-laws are living with me. My child is in university, is in school, just getting into college. So she said this 15% for me is material. And she's customer care. So it's not that she was at some very, very high salary either. Now, here was my dilemma. I know that this is a genuine situation. Option one, I can tell, okay, listen, I'm helping you. Don't tell anybody else. I solve her problem, but then I break the trust and the culture of the organization. I said, that's not good enough. Second, I can say, okay, listen, I'm writing on a personal check, nothing to do with the company, solves her problem, but then everybody else in the organization also has some issue or the other where they need help. And they start approaching me. I have limited resources. And then I breed an unnecessary misunderstanding where they say, you helped so-and-so, but didn't help me. I said, this is not a sustainable answer either. Third, I can hide behind policy and say, listen, the company is doing what it can. I'm sorry. As per company policy, at best, I can give you a loan, but there's nothing more I can do. That doesn't solve the problem. And that's not the right thing to do. I said, yet something needs to be done. So I said, Aruna, give me 2 days. Let me come back to you. And I clearly remember on the second day, I was sitting in my quiet time and I got the clear thought, make a policy that if anybody loses their spouse in the company will take care of the child's or the children's education right through to university. So it was transparent. It was a policy nobody else would mind. Nobody would want it for themselves. And yet it took care of her needs directly or indirectly. So what I'm saying is that, and you know, the relationships that we carry are of strategic importance. It's not just about doing something to make sure that our team stays with us. Yes, of course, that is a very desirable outcome, but that's not the reason I think, we do this. And it wasn't just the team members. I remember that in the month of May in India, the lockdown started in April. Interestingly, I had two conversations that shaped my thinking at that time. One was with Peter Vickers, who's on this call. Second was with Farhad Forbes. Okay. And I remember Farhad telling me one thing. He's saying, we are collecting our payments. I said, Farhad, whole world is shut down. He said, yeah, but that's fine. Go ahead and do it. And between Farhad and Peter, my thinking got shaped because I kept second guessing myself every day. And I said, who do I reach out to? Right. What I found was customer payments started coming when the whole country was in lockdown. Because we had built a strong relationship with them and we went out of our way to explain to them that, look, yes, you are under pressure, we are under pressure, we need to find a win-win. Money started coming in. Customer loyalty stayed with us. customers didn't shop around for a bargain or a cheaper price. I remember we didn't lose a single customer, during that time, unless they were closed for their reasons. We got supplier support from everywhere in terms of the supply chain, in terms of, whatever was needed. But I learned a very new dimension of relationships during this difficult time. My competitor called me. He said, "This is a very embarrassing phone call and a very awkward phone call to have with you." I said, "What happened?" He's saying, "Because of the supply chain disruption, we've run out of raw material. Can you ship us some raw material to keep the factory going?" And I remember telling him, I said, "Prakash bhai, this is not the time for you and me to think as competitors. This is the time for us to take care of our people, to take care of our companies, and in a small way, to take care of our customers and the country." We shipped raw material to our competitor to keep their factory going. And why did we do that? I could have been very opportunistic and said, "Hey, great, this guy is not going to be producing for another 2 months. I can get his business." But is that really the kind of business I want? The answer is no. Because as a business and as an enterprise, I was anchored to what is the right thing to do. And which brings me to the next point, that there's a lot of intellectual and financial capital in the world. What we need to build is the capital of compassion. That even as we are in competitive landscapes, even as we are fighting for market share and gross margins and cash flow and all of that, we work in a compassionate manner. Has this attitude helped us to grow in challenging times? Absolutely. Can I draw a mathematical correlationship? Sometimes yes, sometimes no. But I truly believe that there is a vibe or a spirit of the organization that a lot of our stakeholders around us are able to sense, which directly, indirectly has given us a lot of benefits, which help us through these difficult times. And along with compassion, the other thing which, and maybe I'm saying this to a group which one doesn't need to, but I realize that ethics is a strategic advantage. It's not just a morally good thing to have. I'll give you two quick examples of that. One is, I remember we were at an exhibition and one of my sales guys came to me very excited saying that this customer will come and buy this tool from us. So I was happy to hear that, but I could find that the excitement in his voice was a little more than normal. Again, he came, in the evening and said, he'll definitely come tomorrow and buy this tool. Fair enough. Next morning, he comes to me. He says the customer order is done. So I called him. I said, "Look, I appreciate the fact that, this customer has bought the tool. You're very happy about it. But why is there this extra excitement? There's a story behind this, right? Which I'm missing. Tell me, because we're selling hundreds of tools every day. So yes, it's good we got this order, but what's the excitement behind this?" He said this customer went to every other stall at the exhibition of our competitors. And the only thing they spoke about was why the customer shouldn't buy from Kaymo. And the customer told him that when I came to you, you only spoke about your value proposition. And in fact, when I asked you, what about the other competitors? The answer was, well, their product is also good. It's not that it doesn't work. It's a good product, which is why in the market, but we believe that we can deliver better long-term value for these reasons. You think that's the reason I chose to buy from your company. And this was not the owner of the company using that language. This was somebody who was at the cutting edge, a frontline salesperson. And which is when I have learned and realized that ethics is not just honesty. It goes way beyond that. It goes way beyond compliance, way beyond honesty. It's just the way in which we conduct ourselves and we conduct our business. The other example I'll give you is our company has something called an AEO status from the customs. AEO is Authorized Economic Operator. Less than 1% of the companies in India have this status. We are at level 2. What this means is not only can I clear my goods from customs without any questions, they even give me credit to pay my duty. You first clear your goods and come back after 15 days and pay us the money. Less than 1% of the companies have this. At a time like this, when India is also putting up all kinds of tariff barriers, non-tariff barriers, making it difficult to bring in foreign products into India, our products and supply chain is seamless. Why? Because we got this 7 years ago. Why did we get this? Because we said if we work in a particular way, let's take advantage of that and get the best value proposition for ourselves. And why did we do that? Because we said that we want to work in a particular way. So it just goes back. If you ask me, the one thing I've learned is navigating through challenging times is not about the challenging times. It's about the long-term investments you've made way before the challenging times, which help you during these difficult times. And the last point, how did I manage personally? And I'm sharing this as an owner manager. I wouldn't use the word business leader, but as somebody who's running the business. And Peter knows this because he was on the other end of the call. It gets lonely. And that's when I reached out to friends, who I knew I will get the right advice from, and I just needed to share what I was going through with. And it wasn't just emotional sharing, it was also getting the intellectual answers to some of the challenges I was grappling with. So one is I recognize that it gets lonely. And don't get me wrong, I was busy on my Zoom calls from 10 in the morning till 7 in the evening. So it wasn't the loneliness. I had no one to talk to. I had lots of people calling me. I was calling lots of people. I was busy, but at some level, I was lonely running this business, right? And having that, I wouldn't use the word network, but I would say having those few people in my life I could reach out to helped me. Having that sense of resilience. Now, where did my resilience come from? Honestly, it came from the stories of my grandfather and my father. My grandpa had to leave everything behind in 47 when India got divided between India and Pakistan during partition. Left his home, left his office, left everything, little bit of money came, lived in a refugee camp and restarted his life. And I grew up listening to those stories. So it just built not only gratitude, but I just reminded myself that if dad and granddad, and dad was 9 years old at that time. He used to, as a 9-year-old, go with his uncles to railway stations to sell handkerchiefs. And at the age of 21, started with 3 machines, worked on the machines himself and delivered products to shops at the end of the day, six dozens. I said, if that's the way dad and granddad have rebuilt their life, then what am I worried about? Somewhere I have their genes, right? So I think stories are a fabulous way of building the inner resilience. Optimism. I wouldn't say it was overconfidence. Obviously, I didn't have the answers. None of us at that time did. Even today, none of us have the answers what's going to happen in the next 6 months, 1 year. But the one thing which I've always tried to carry with me is, you know what? If there is a problem, the answer will emerge. My job is to just hang in there, be cheerful, be optimistic, and find that answer, or let the answer find me. Now, this may sound a little airy-fairy, it may sound a little romantic, if I may use that word, but trust me, as a business owner, okay, going through some of the challenging times, this has really, really helped. A sense of faith. Once I remember complaining to my mom about something. I don't even remember what it was. And she said one thing to me that stayed with me always. She said, never ask why me. Always say, now what? Just have the faith. Ask that question, work around that answer, and have the faith that if you're doing the right thing in the right way, the right people and the right situation will come. And if it's not coming as per expectation, don't worry. It is just preparing you for something bigger and better. And you're meant to go through that experience and you'll come out stronger. But don't lose your resilience, optimism, and faith. And the final point, the number of times an answer has popped into my head, okay, is just unbelievable. And quiet time is your best companion in the most challenging times. this is one thing that I carry with me as a business strategy, as a personal guide, that, my largest transaction of my life was done purely on a call from within saying, you know what, do this. And I shook hands with somebody, my largest transaction on a handshake, and just looking the man in the eye. Not out of arrogance, not out of overconfidence. I can take no credit. It was just a gut from within which said, you know, do this. And this, to my mind, in a nutshell, has been my set of experiences, learnings, and some of my uh, thoughts on how I have and we as a company have grown in challenging times. Thank you very much.